When I first created this presentation about 10 years or so ago, I had about 20 or so natural wonders that I had identified at that time. And since then, I'm up to 30. And in fact, one of them I just added 2 weeks ago. So I'm always on the lookout for new natural wonders to include in this presentation. So let's just go ahead and get started. And by the way, I'm going to cover the natural wonders from the northern part of South America down to the southernmost tip. So that's what drives the sequence of the lectures I'm sharing with you today. So we're going to start off with the Catatumbo lightning. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. All right, let's try that one more time. Here we go. Okay, Catatumbo lightning. They take place right here in Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela. The most intense and predictable lightning in the world. It's really quite a natural phenomenon. And let's see if we can get a little bit of audio going here. It's really quite a remarkable phenomenon. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. 140 nights of the year, 9 hours per night, 280 times an hour. Can you imagine being in the middle of something like that? That's a truly remarkable thing. The reason that this natural phenomenon is occurring is that the winds blow across Lake Maracaibo, and the lake is surrounded on 3 sides by mountains. And when the winds strike those mountains, the moisture-laden winds go up in the sky, and the beautiful, beautiful fireworks begin 140 nights of the year. Can you imagine trying to sleep in that area with all that kind of activity going on? Okay, Tepui, the houses of the gods, the oldest rock formations in South America. And as you can see, they are located along the Venezuela-Guyana border. Really quite remarkable. There's nothing like them in the world. They're 80 million years old. Now, I don't know if any of you remember this movie. Back in 2009, Pixar came up with the movie Up. I see a few heads nodding. Just quickly, the plot line is that this older gentleman, his wife passed away, and he attached a whole series of balloons to his house and floated to South America because he had a dream of visiting Paradise Falls. As a boy, he'd read about them. He wanted to visit the Paradise Falls, which were located on the Tepui. You can see one in the background right there. And this is what they look like in natural life. This particular Tepui is the Roraima Tepui, and 3 countries, Guyana, Venezuela, and Brazil, all meet, their boundaries all meet at the top of that mesa. There are a total of about 15 mesas, and over centuries, millennia, different species have developed that are unique to those particular locations because they're so isolated. As you can see, they rise up from thousands of feet from the floor below. And in fact, I don't know if any of you remember Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. He was writing about the Tepui and how different life forms had existed there that didn't exist anywhere else, including dinosaurs that were still existing. So that was sort of the plot of that book by Arthur Conan Doyle, set at this location. Now, one of these, Tepui, is the source of our next natural wonder, Angel Falls. As you can see, again, it's located in that area near the Guyana-Venezuela border, the world's highest uninterrupted waterfall. Back in 1933, this aviator, Jimmy Angel, was flying around northern South America to identify possible geological sources of iron and various valuable metals, flying in that airplane. And one day, as he was flying around, he saw this. If you do your math really fast, remember that how many feet in a mile? 5,280. Divide by 2, it's almost exactly the height of Angel Falls. Can you imagine a waterfall 1/2 mile long from the time it leaves the top of the Tepui to the time that it hits the ground? Oh, let me just interject something here. Some of these natural wonders are objectively the most fill in the blank. For example, I'll share with you in just a minute the point in the world where you are farthest from the center of the world. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Something that can be measured. About half of the natural wonders are more subjective in nature, such as this one, the most beautiful river in the world. Well, that's what some people say, and perhaps you'll agree after we take a look at it. Caño Cristales, the river, is located in the middle southern center of Colombia. So what causes this river to be so beautiful and have these wonderful colors? Well, during July to November, the plants that are growing in the river take on this color. And so for that period of time, this is what people see when they come to visit Caño Cristales. So it may very well be the most beautiful river in the world. The Humboldt Current. Let me just mention that Humboldt was a Prussian naturalist and explorer. And in the early part of I guess it was the 19th century, he was exploring this part of the world, and he was the first one to measure the temperature of this particular current that runs along the west coast of South America. Why is it the world's greatest fishery? Apparently, the current brings cold water up from the depths, and that then creates a whole web of life, starting with the plankton and then up into the larger fish, so that the Humboldt Current accounts for about 20% of the fish that are caught every year. As you can see, a lot of fishermen ply the waters of the Humboldt Current. And when I was visiting Manta, Ecuador, that's the tuna fish capital of the world. And I took this picture, or maybe my wife did. Whoops, didn't mean to do that, excuse me. I'll hold this down. And I'm trying to, I know what to do. There it is. As you can see, there's a net that's dumping fish into these containers. And then it's quickly frozen and sent to the markets of the world. And this is taking place in Manta, Ecuador, the tuna fish capital of the world. My wife took that picture. And so moving on, again, we're moving from north to south. So pretty much due east of where we've just been talking about, there's Ecuador, and Manta is right on the coast there. Our next natural wonder, the sixth natural wonder, the world's greatest living laboratory. As you can see from this graphic, The Galapagos Islands, where that star is located, is sort of the center of where a lot of different ocean currents converge. Coming up from the south, the Humboldt Current, the Peru Ocean Current; coming from the north, the Panamic Current, and the South Equatorial Current. And this has created a really remarkable location where there are species that are found nowhere else in the world. The Galapagos Islands, there are approximately, well, I guess 21 of them, 18 larger ones and 3 smaller ones. It's a very different environment. Now, perhaps you've heard of Charles Darwin. He was a very unmotivated medical student who decided he'd take a year's break. I guess that's a popular thing these days, to leave school and go and do something else. Well, that year became 5 years. This unmotivated medical student signed on with an exploration ship called the Beagle. And the Beagle sailed around South America, and it ended up in the Galapagos Islands. And Charles Darwin noticed that on each island, there were variations between the species on that island and the other islands nearby. And he came up with the theory of evolution. He wrote the book Origin of the Species. And that theory is that not the strongest survive or the most intelligent, but the most adaptable to change. And so it was that in these islands of the Galapagos, there were species that were really quite different, and they had evolved differently from their neighbors in other islands nearby. And here are a few of the species that are unique. The Galapagos sea lion in the upper left, the marine iguanas, the blue-footed boobies, frigate birds, just to name a few. And as you can see, evolution continues in the Galapagos Islands as new species evolve. But there's one kind of animal that is associated especially with the Galapagos Islands, the turtles, the tortoises, the land tortoises. And apparently on one of the islands, Hispaniola Island, a particular species of tortoises was pretty much dying out. There were only 2 males left, and they were very, very old, and 15 females. And the decision was made by conservationists, let's bring in another male. So San Diego Zoo donated Diego, and he came on board, and he knew what his job was, and he fathered over 900 baby tortoises. So Diego saved the sex machine that saved his species. And we all appreciate you, Diego. He's still alive, by the way. They turned him out to pasture. He's no longer good for breeding purposes, but he's still well over 100 years, by the way, still enjoying life. Okay, we're proceeding. We're still in Ecuador. We're still at that same latitude as the last couple of natural wonders, Mount Chimborazo, the point farthest from the center of the earth. What? How can that be? We all know that Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, and how can someone on the top of Chimborazo be farther from the center of the earth than Everest? How can that be? That's a picture of it. And now to answer the question, Everest is 29,029 feet above sea level, and Chimborazo quite a bit less, about 8,000 to 9,000 less. But look, the distance from the center of the earth, Chimborazo, the top of it, is farther. How can that be? Put on your thinking caps for a minute. How can that be? I think you're going to learn, many of you are going to learn something right now. It's where they are located on the earth that makes the difference. Chimborazo's only 1.5 degrees south. In other words, it's right on the equator. Ecuador is named as equator in Spanish. It's right on the equator. Everest is quite a distance north of the equator, 28 degrees north. Okay, but still, that doesn't answer the question. And the question is answered by the fact that the Earth is not a perfect sphere. At the center, from north to south, it's 7,900 miles in diameter, if you're going north to south. At the equator, 7,926. So the land at the equator is 26 miles farther from the center of the Earth than would be a similar mountain at one of the poles. So it's this oblate spheroid that, and in fact, many of us are like oblate spheroids. We're getting a little wider at the equator, right? And so that is the explanation why Chimborazo is actually the mountain, is the location farthest from the center of the Earth. Isn't that remarkable? Now, this is good for any of you play Trivia Pursuit. That's the answer to the question. Where is the place that's farthest from the center of the Earth? Okay, now we are going to another really interesting place. We're proceeding south into Peru, Mount Huascaran, the point of lowest gravity on the Earth. How can that be? What is the possible explanation where you will weigh less there than you will anywhere else in the world? Well, here's the answer. It has the lowest gravitational pull, weight, for several reasons. Number one, equatorial bulge. Once again, you're further from the center of the Earth. The centrifugal force, when you're near the equator, the centrifugal force is greater than elsewhere in the world. It's fairly high above sea level, but not like Everest or anything like that. And apparently the Earth crust in that area is very dense. And these four different factors come together to create the place on the Earth where the gravity is the least. So the natural question is, where is the most gravity? Where are you heaviest? And that's in the Arctic Ocean. Apparently there's a location where you're the heaviest. And it's 1% difference from that lowest point, from that particular location, the weight that you would have at that location versus the weight that you would have at Mount Huascaran. So in other words, you weigh 200 pounds, you go from the Arctic Ocean to Mount Huascaran, you're going to weigh 1% less. What is that? 20 pounds? So if you want to lose weight, just go from the Arctic Ocean to Mount Huascaran. Okay, the Amazon River. How many people have been on the Amazon? Okay, a lot of you. I've been on it 4 times. It's the world's mightiest river. And let me just, oops, my advancer is, okay, now we're good. Okay, I've got the best advancer on the market, and it still has its problems. So the Amazon River begins about here, and then it proceeds on down to here. Even though that's where Google Maps marked it, it's of course quite a large river. And in fact, the Amazon River basin covers 40% of South America. Wherever the rainfall, 40%, wherever the rain is falling, it goes into the Amazon River. And this is what it looks like when it's superimposed on a map of the United States. It covers the whole United States. truly a huge river. Now, I developed this because I wanted to really show you how big the Amazon River really is. The Amazon River is the largest river in the world, but 2 through 7 adds up the flow of water, cubic meters per second, adds up to around 205,000. The Amazon by itself, more than all 7 of the next larger rivers. And in fact, it accounts for 20% of the fresh water in the world that flows into the oceans. Is it the longest river in the world? Depends on who you're talking to. As you can see, there are a number of different sources, the maps of useful knowledge, USGS, Brazilian researchers, and as you might imagine, Brazilian researchers have concluded that it is the longest river in the world. So in other words, it's still up for debate. And the key question is, where is the source of the tributary that's the farthest from the mouth of the river, where it flows into the ocean? So there's some controversy in terms of where that is, and that is why the length of the river is still a matter of contention and debate. It's really a remarkable river in that you can sail 900 miles from the ocean to Manaus, and I've done that 2 or 3 times, with regular sailing ships, cruise ships, and various other kinds of ocean-going vessels. And in fact, the smaller ocean-going vessels can go all the way up to Iquitos, Peru, 2,250 miles. What a remarkable river. It has a very deep channel, and that is why these ocean-going vessels can go so far up the river. Okay, now we're moving a little bit to the east and a little bit south to Lençóis Maranhenses. As you can see, it's in Brazil. It's right on the ocean, the world's strangest desert. Now, what is a desert? I'll get into that in just a minute. This is what it looks like. Sand dunes up to 130 feet high, spread out over a really large area. This really looks like a desert. Well, a desert is a geographic location that gets 0.04 inches or less rain per year. And think of the Sahara Desert and the Mojave Desert and so forth and so on. So this, even though it looks like a desert, during the rainy times of the year, when you would expect, well, first of all, you wouldn't expect a rainy time of the year for most deserts. But this being Brazil, near the Amazon, a lot of rain. And so what happens, instead of a land that looks like this, it looks like that. And it gets 47 inches of rain, far more than 0.04 that is required to be called a desert. Now, why doesn't the water just go right through it? Well, first of all, the source of the sand, the rivers on either side of it have dumped a lot of debris, sediment, including sand, in the ocean nearby, and then formed beaches. The winds blew the sand inland to form this area. And underneath it, not very far underneath it, is an impermeable layer of rock that keeps the water from going out of sight. And so during the rainy times of the year, you get this kind of phenomenon, pools and lagoons and so forth. And in fact, to give you a sense of scale, these are people right there. It's really magnificent. As you can imagine, people come from all over the world to see this phenomenon during the rainy part of the year. Okay, now we're moving back to the west coast, the Pacific coast, a little further south. We're in Peru now. Mount Alpamayo. And this is one of those subjective natural wonders, the most beautiful mountain in the world. Of course, some people would say that there are other mountains as beautiful. I leave it up to you to decide. This is what it looks like, a steep, almost perfect pyramid of ice. Of course, you're looking at that from one angle, and this is the same mountain from another angle. But it truly is beautiful. And we're still in Peru for this one. A little further south, the Chanay-Tempishka River, the world's only boiling river. Now, of course, many of us have been to hot springs and so forth, and perhaps we've been in locations near volcanoes where the rivers running off of the mountains were quite warm. That's a really wonderful experience. But this river is different. It's not near any known active volcanoes or geothermal vents, but apparently the Earth's crust is very close to the surface here because the water is between 113 degrees Fahrenheit up to 212. What's the boiling point of water? 212. So it is, in fact, the only boiling river in the world. And there's really no other explanation in that the Earth's crust is very close to the top, to the surface of the Earth at that point. Still in Peru, Mount Vinicunca, the mountain of three colors. I added this to the list just a few years ago because I wouldn't have called Mount Vinicunca the mountain of seven colors back then, because this is the way it looked like. When the snow cover melted in 2016, however, the mountain underlying the snow was revealed for the first time. Again, global warming has exposed a lot of land that had been laden with ice, and this is what people saw. Iron, hematite, sulfur, various minerals that were located in the area, and the movement of tectonic plates created this pattern. Can you imagine that? And there's some people right, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. Some people, I'll go back one more. People right there are really enjoying that mountain. And this is another view of it. And another natural wonder in Peru. In fact, when I saw all of these Peru natural wonders, I was thinking, how many of the 30 are in Peru? And I think I came up with something like 7 of the 30 natural wonders I'll talk about today that are in Peru. Colca Canyon, the second deepest canyon in the world. How does it compare to the Grand Canyon was your first question, right? There's the answer. A little bit less than twice as deep as the Grand Canyon. By the way, the canyon that is the deepest and longest in the world is located in Tibet. But Colca Canyon is number 2 in the world. Moving a little further south, and this time we're right on the border with Bolivia. This natural wonder spreads across the border in each direction. So you move from one country to another as you're sailing down Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world. 12,507 feet above sea level. And there are some very large ships that navigate this lake. It's far and above, much, much higher than any other navigable lake in the world. Now, when my wife and I visited Lake Titicaca back in 2016, we noticed these stacks of reeds, totora reeds, had been harvested along the shoreline of the lake. And we were wondering, okay, why are they harvesting? Are they part of the diet? No, not really. But they are part of a culture that has created floating islands that are made of the totora reeds. They're very buoyant. So we sailed out to this island, got off the ship, and we were standing on nothing but reeds at that point. And since the reeds deteriorate as they become water-soaked over the years, this is a cross-section of one of the islands. A whole series of years of totora reeds that were stacked on each other. Each year they have to replenish the supply of totora reeds because the ones at the very bottom are dropping off and going down to the bottom of the lake. So it's a very interesting culture. The Oros Islands. These people have lived in isolation. Well, they lived in isolation for many years, but right now they're making a lot of money from the tourist trade. So they're not isolated at all now. The Pantanal, the world's largest wetland area. As you can see from the map, a lot of it is in Brazil, but it overflows a little bit into Bolivia and Paraguay as well. But most of it is in Brazil. Now, during the dry season, this was a very, I guess, a satellite map. The various lines that have been added by some editor indicate river channels. And this was the picture that was taken during the dry season, which was May to October. This is the picture that was taken of the same area during November to April. And as you can see, it's been totally transformed by water. There are approximately 1,200 vertebrate animals, species, that live in the Pantanal, and about 600 bird species. So if you're a birder, this is a place that you want to go. And so what attracts the birds? We'll see in just a moment. Pantanal during the dry season, those are capybara. By the way, the world's largest rodent. They get up to about 200 pounds. And this is the rainy season. And so the birds are attracted by all of these water areas. The whole ecology transforms from from the transition from dry season to rainy season and then back. During the dry season, you would not see any water there. And now we're going from a very wet place to a place that's not wet at all, the largest salt flat in the world. As you can see, it's located in Bolivia, near the Chile border. And it's a unique natural phenomenon because over 4,086 square miles, there's virtually no elevation difference, only 3 feet elevation variation over such a large area. And this kind of environment creates it tricks the mind. The scale of things is different. And so people go there to take all kinds of crazy pictures. Of course, the person standing is very close to the camera, and the other people are probably 20 feet away. And when it rains, the salt flat is covered with water, and it becomes a mirror. So again, the only place in the world, the largest salt flat in the world. And now we're moving a little further south in Bolivia to the Laguna Colorada, the most colorful lake in the world. Well, I don't know if it's the most colorful, but it is very colorful. Sediments, pigmentation of algae in the water cause the lake to have a very deep red color. And now we're moving to the driest non-polar desert in the world. As you can see, it's located in Chile on the western side of the Andes Mountains. By the way, the driest non-polar desert, the driest polar desert in the world is McMurdo Sound Valley Desert in Antarctica, where people have not been able to verify that rain has ever fallen there. But in the Atacama, it's very, very dry, the most dry outside of the Antarctica. Now, why is this the case? The annual precipitation, less than 0.004 inches. The reason is that the prevailing winds at that part of Chile come from the east, and they hit the Andes Mountains and drop a lot of rain on the eastern side of the Andes. And therefore, when the winds continue progressing to the west, they have no moisture. And so the Atacama Desert is in a rain, what's called a rain shadow. Some locations, no rain for over 400 years. It's an otherworldly kind of environment. And in fact, some people have thought that perhaps this is what Mars really looks like. We have our own Mars on the Earth. And NASA recognized that and decided that as they prepared for their various Mars missions, that they would test different kinds of equipment here. And so this is the Mars rover prototype in the Atacama Desert. And when they finally made it to Mars, there's the rover on Mars. Now, the unique environmental factors in the Atacama Desert make it a perfect place for observation of outer space. There are a lot of observatories there already. And this particular observatory, an optical telescope, is supposed to be built beginning in 2028, finished in 2030 or something like that. And it will be the largest optical telescope by far ever developed. Why did they decide to put it there? Very dry, very clear in terms of no man-made light pollution or clouds, and a high altitude. Those three different factors determined that this huge optical telescope would be built in the Atacama Desert. And now we're moving a little further south, and just inside the Chile-Bolivia border is the El Tatio geyser field, the third largest geyser field in the world. And by the way, where does Yellowstone fit in there? It's number one. There are 225 geysers in the El Tatio geyser field. Iguazu Falls. For many years, Iguazu Falls was on my bucket list. It was at the very top of my bucket list. And about 10 years or so ago, my wife and I were able to go visit Iguazu Falls. Any of you have been to Iguazu? You're really going to relate to this because, I mean, just looking at these pictures, bring that experience back to me. As you can see, it's located right, interesting how these natural wonders seem to be located right at the convergence of different borders in some cases. In this case, Iguazu Falls is on the border of Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina. And we flew from Buenos Aires, right there at the very bottom, to Iguazu Falls. You can go by bus, but it takes forever. And so we went there about 10 years or so ago. It's called the largest waterfall system in the world. Interesting phraseology. Let me explain what I'm talking about there. It's very wide, but it's not just one waterfall, but 275 individual waterfalls. Victoria Falls, which everyone thinks of as the largest waterfall in the world, actually it is the single largest waterfall in the world, a sheet of water that is 1 mile wide. So by using the word waterfall system, 1.7 miles wide, that is why they use the word system. It's not the largest waterfall, but together they are much larger than the Victoria Falls. And by the way, when Eleanor Roosevelt visited Iguazu Falls, she was quoted as saying, "Poor Niagara." My wife and I decided to go for a walk. To what is called La Garganta del Diablo, the throat of the devil. They had that walkway that I showed just a moment ago out to here. Throat of the devil, and my gosh, it was tremendously exciting. Beautiful, beautiful. No one could ever survive going over that waterfall in a barrel. Mount Aconcagua. Here we are currently in Chile, the highest mountain outside of Asia. In fact, it's the highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. So it is really gives Mount Everest a run for the money. Now, one interesting thing about Mount Aconcagua that makes it different than other mountains of similar size or even smaller is that you don't need ropes or special climbing equipment. You don't need oxygen. Apparently, it's called a non-technical mountain. And people can climb the mountain to the summit without all of that specialized equipment. The Marble Caves of Patagonia. Okay, we are again still within the boundary of Chile, the world's most beautiful cave network. This is Lake General Carrera. And apparently there was a peninsula going out into the lake that was all marble. And over a period of years, the erosion caused by wave action on this lake created this cave network. So in fact, it may well be the most beautiful cave network in the world. People take small boats and go throughout these caves. That would really be a great experience. The fjords of Chile. Let me just take a moment and remount my... Okay. All right, the fjords of Chile. As you can see, we're down in southern Chile now. And when you blow up that map, this is what it looks like. It's just riddled with canals, inland waterways. And in fact, that part of Brazil, of Chile, there are no north-south roads because there's no contiguous land for any distance. It's just full of these waterways, which are called fjords. Now, when you think about the word fjord, you're thinking about something that looks like that, right? Steep walls, deep channels, Norway, Scandinavia, places like that. Well, that's what I had expected, but when we went there, I had discovered that they are deep waterways, but there are not steep mountains right next to them. So I had to sort of redefine in my own mind the word fjord. And here are a few more pictures. It's a remarkable experience, but it's nothing like what you would experience in Scandinavia. And now a bonus natural wonder. I was noticing the other day that at Aldi, they were advertising Chilean Atlantic salmon. And I thought, hold on a minute. Chile does not face the Atlantic. It faces the Pacific. Here's the Atlantic over here. So I thought I'll include that in my Natural Wonders lecture. Thank you, Aldi. Okay, the southern Patagonia ice field. As you can see, it's located, once again, in that part that we were just talking about, the fjords. On the land to the east of the fjords is the world's third largest reserve of fresh water. So, of course, your next question is, what's the largest? The largest is the Antarctic ice field. The second largest is the Greenland ice field. And the third largest reserve of fresh water is the Patagonia ice field. Now, I showed you this just a moment ago when we were talking about the Atacama Desert, how the prevailing winds strip the air of moisture and drop them on the east side, creating a rain shadow. Well, down in this part of the world that we're talking about now, the prevailing winds come from the west, and they hit the Andes Mountains and drop all of their moisture on the western side of the Andes Mountains. And it has created the third largest reserve of fresh water in the world. It is absolutely enormous. This is what some of it looks like, ground level. And it has something like 30 or 40 glaciers. This is the Perito, Perito Moreno, the dark, Perito Moreno in Spanish means a dark little dog. I have no idea why it got that name, but this is the Perito Moreno Glacier. It's one of the few glaciers in the world that is remaining stable. It is not retreating, as are most of the glaciers these days. And this is one that I added 2 weeks ago, the Laguna del Carbón, the lowest point in the Americas. It's located in Argentina, and this is what it looks like. Not very impressive, but again, the lowest point in the whole Western Hemisphere. And well, where does Death Valley fit in? Death Valley is about number 4 in the world. And the lowest point in the world, anyone want to take a guess where that might be? The Dead Sea, which by way of comparison is about 1,400 feet below sea level. So it's in a total different class than all of the other low-lying areas. Torres del Paine. Torres in Spanish means towers. Paine is in the native dialect a word that means blue. And again, this is a subjective natural wonder, the South America's most beautiful natural park. Again, it's located in that same area of Chile that we've just been talking about. You know, as I was looking at this, I was thinking, how does this compare to the Grand Tetons, which is, in my experience in the United States, the most dramatic mountains? It really is spectacular, even more spectacular than the Grand Tetons. And by the way, the Torres del Paine is actually referring to these 3 granite towers here, but the whole area is called Torres del Paine. Absolutely remarkable. It's not easy to get to, and I haven't been to this one, but it's on my list. The Strait of Magellan. I'm not going to ask by a show of hands, but for most of my life, I thought it was the Straits, plural, of Magellan, but it's the Strait of Magellan. As you can see, it's entirely in Chile, and starts right about there, and proceeds on through here and up that way. And I called it the Cape Horn shortcut. It's really a remarkable natural phenomenon in that it provided, and still does today, provides ships the opportunity to avoid the horrible sea conditions around the Cape, around the southern part of South America. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But first of all, a little bit more about the Strait of Magellan. Of course, it was named after Ferdinand Magellan. In his circumnavigation of the world, well, actually, he didn't complete his circumnavigation. He was killed in the Philippines. But that particular expedition in 1520, he somehow stumbled on this very convoluted route. You know, can you imagine? He started sailing into it, and I thought, well, where's this going to go? We're going to keep going. He fully expected a dead end, and he was able to navigate the entire Strait of Magellan without turning back. It's really a remarkable place. It's about 350 miles from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and in terms of this, whoops, didn't mean to do that, sorry. Let's go back one more. Okay, in terms of the shallowest part, 92 feet, the deepest is 3,500. The narrowest, 0.5 miles, and the widest is about 10.3. Now, what all that adds up to is the fact that the largest ships in the world, this is a Reagan class, the USS Reagan, a U.S. aircraft carrier, it sails very easily through the Strait of Magellan. And when my wife and I went through the Strait of Magellan many years ago, she took these pictures. In that part of the world, it's cloudy most of the time, raining quite a bit of the time. And we're coming towards the end here, number 29, Tierra del Fuego. In English, that means land of fire. It doesn't refer to any volcanic activity, but rather early mariners, the indigenous people living on the Tierra del Fuego, had bonfires, apparently, they used for whatever purpose, and sailors saw them and they called it the land of fire. But it was actually the indigenous people, fires that they were making. So it encompasses this whole area right here, this rather large island. It's disconnected from the mainland, Tierra del Fuego. Interesting climate. It's called a subpolar oceanic climate. Short, cool summers, long, wet, moderate winters. And apparently the weather can change on a dime. In 15 minutes, you go from a torrential downpour to a snowstorm. And when I saw this picture, I was thinking, gosh, that looks like something out of Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings. This is, in my mind, what that kind of location would look like. And then finally, last but not least, the southernmost part of South America is called Cape Horn. As you can see, it's the southernmost island, and in fact, it's the cape that juts out into the Drake Passage that is called the Cape Horn. The first ship to double the Cape was a ship named the Unity. The Unity was a Dutch ship. The home port of the Unity was Hoorn, Netherlands. And therefore, they named it the Cape Horn. And that is the cape right there, the southernmost location. Now, as perhaps some of you have heard, oh, by the way, let me define the term double the cape. To double the cape, that terminology means a ship that, whoops, I'm still learning how to use this thing. Okay, all right, here we go. A ship that begins above the 50th parallel, goes down and around the tip, and then it goes above the 50th parallel in the other ocean, either east to west or west to east. That's called doubling the cape. So the first ship to do that was the Unity. And Drake Passage, which is the body of water between Cape Horn and the Antarctica, is the most dangerous place in the entire world for ships. More than 1,000 ships and 15,000 lives have been lost in the Drake Passage. And the reason for that is that if you go around the world at that latitude, there's no land. So there's no land that breaks the flow, the circular flow of water. Winds and currents develop regularly that far exceed any other ocean winds or currents. And so it is that the saying became known, below 40 south, there is no law. Below 50 south, there is no God. So that concludes my presentation today, but I wanted to give you a bonus fact for those of you who play Trivial Pursuit. Okay, there it is. All South America is east of Key West. So it's not directly south of the United States, it's to the east.